The COP28 United Nations climate talks have gone into extra time amid anger and stalemate over the final agreement. A draft text released on Monday caused uproar from Pacific states, the United States and the EU over its failure to set out the phasing out of fossil fuels, seen as crucial to keep global warming to a previously agreed target of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Well, let's talk to Kaveh Guilanpour, who's Vice President for International Strategies at the Centre for Climate and Energy Solutions. Good to see you, Kaveh. Well, look, you're there. Where are we on this? Agreement, no agreement? What stage are negotiations at?
Well, we're really in the final stages of the negotiations. The COP was actually due to end earlier today, so we're already into overtime. As you say, we had a new text delivered yesterday. The COP president has been meeting with negotiating groups and countries throughout the day, and we're eagerly awaiting the release of the next version of the text in the coming hours.
In brief, what are they stuck on?
I think it's, as you said in the introduction, it's really this question, on the one hand, of what signal this outcome from COP28 says about the transition away from fossil fuels towards green energy. And this totemic notion of some wording around the phase out of fossil fuels is one of the issues that has really been the sticking point. I think the COP president will be desperately trying to find, at this point, a form of words that achieves the same thing in terms of the transition, but maybe uses a different form of wording.
This is like herding cats, isn't it? I mean, how difficult is it going to be to get all these countries to reach an agreement and sign off on it?
Well, as you say, it's in the multilateral process, there's around 197 countries, and they all have to reach consensus. In theory, just one of them can block the outcome. Of course, the notion of peer pressure and the expectation of the outside world to see some progress on this, particularly in light of the latest science and the impacts we're seeing around the world, is applying a lot of pressure. But the COP president certainly has an unenviable task to try to bring everyone together around one form of wording.
Does it matter if everyone gets back on their private jets and no agreement is reached tomorrow?
It does matter, because the Paris Agreement at its core has something called the 5-year ambition cycle. And at the center of that is the global stocktake, where every 5 years countries come together to see where they are against the goals of the Paris Agreement, to inform the next round of ambition in terms of climate targets that we're expecting next year, and also to enhance international cooperation. So this is really the most important COP since Paris. And if we leave here without some clear signals on the way forward, it really wouldn't be very well received.
Well, you've been watching events. How optimistic, how hopeful are you?
Well, I've been pretty optimistic coming into COP28. On the first day of the COP, we had a historic and unprecedented result in terms of agreeing the loss and damage fund and actually having it capitalized. We've never had the agreement of a substantive issue like that on the first day of the COP. So things were started off on a very good footing. We had over 120 countries signing a pledge to triple renewable energy by 2030. So all of that set the good tone. But this has really come down to this question of phase out of fossil fuels. I still think that we can find a way forward. It's often a question of the right language to make, as they say, everyone equally unhappy, but that also responds to the science and sets a clear signal for the way forward.
If agreement cannot be reached, what is the point of COP?
Well, that's never really happened in recent years. I mean, the last time that happened was in the famous Copenhagen COP back in 2009, which was widely deemed to have failed against expectations. I think the situation is very different now. The science is unequivocal. All countries do want to move forward. It's really about giving assurances to everyone that, first of all, we're meeting the ambition that we need, but also that the transition to a new form of energy system around the world is done in a just and equitable way, but also that it's done in an orderly way that doesn't create price shocks and maintains supply.
And what do you say to the critics of COP who will just point out what they describe as the hypocrisy of the whole event? People from around the world flying in on their private jets and not really coming to any real agreement. Do you understand that criticism from outside those hallowed walls?
Absolutely do understand that. And actually, in recent years, we've seen a move towards holding more meetings online, particularly during the pandemic. Lots of the preparations for COP26 in Glasgow were held online, including multiple negotiating sessions. But there's some things that you just cannot achieve in an online meeting, not least the problems of negotiating in multiple time zones inevitably will disadvantage some. But also there's just so many conversations that happen in the margins of these meetings, and you really can't substitute for the person-to-person contact. So I do understand the concern and skepticism of that, but we really do have to come together on this issue, and face-to-face is really the only way.
Kaveh Guilanpour, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme. Kaveh Guilanpour, Vice President for International Strategies at the Centre for Climate and Energy Solutions.